Please support this podcast by purchasing Tio MacDonald books, found on both Audible and Amazon. Thank you.
And your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel-Link.
Okay.
Thank you, Mpingo, for
All right.
calling back, and
Absolutely.
we'll just give you the mic. You were speaking about
Okay.
your relationship with Bonnie and the benefits that were received, and the nice thing is this was a cross-cultural relationship as well.
Absolutely. As I was saying, she taught me how to view things in a different light than what I was used to. Not only, like I said, she teach me a skill as far as bookkeeping and even shopkeeping and becoming an entrepreneur. She taught me how to integrate my way of thinking. She taught me how to express myself in a manner that those who were not involved in the community that I grew up in could relate to. So she did more for me in that sense than my own parents and my own family did.
And how long did your relationship with Bonnie stay intact? How long did that, did you earn an income with her and live with your sister?
Now my relationship with Bonnie lasted for about 15 years. However, at that time, I worked for her for maybe 9 months, and what happened was she ended up having to close her shop and to go back. At this time, she was living in Baltimore. Bethesda, Maryland, but she was originally from Montana, Missouri, and her parents passed away, and she ended up having to go back. So she closed her shop and she went back there, and so I lost contact with her for a while. But at the same time, I was still living. I was still having contact with my sister, and when my sister embraced me and moved me in, she taught me how to be a woman.
And I'm not trying to. Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to gloss over the homeless period. I'm sure that we can get into those struggles and just the raw experience of it. I mean, anyone who can kind of put their mind into your shoes as a 14-year-old female identifying man on the streets of a major metropolitan city, which you knew, but somehow you found a way, and somehow you avoided a lot of the traps of that kids fall into, especially transgender.
It was hard.
Yes.
Absolutely. It was hard. It was very hard. And I think one of the things that helped me avoid a lot of the traps is, as I said, I was an introvert. I was not a real social person. I didn't go out and make friends because I did not want to deal with the struggles. I did not want to deal with the backlash, the anger, the hatred, the homophobic slurs. I did not want to deal with the fighting and having to prove myself. So I stayed to myself. So that helped me avoid a lot of the pitfalls. That helped me avoid a lot of the lures that draw you in. What I did, I mean, on a daily basis, I can remember just wandering the streets and just looking around and going back and forth from Baltimore to Washington D.C. to Baltimore, on the subway, and just riding the subway and experiencing. I remember a couple of times just riding the subway during rush hour and seeing the people of various cultures and wondering what their life were like, what they were thinking, what they were going to do, and I would imagine myself in their shoes, imagine myself living their lives. I would imagine myself being secured, having a home, having a family that love me, having money in my pocket, having food to eat. So a lot of my time this was during the summertime, a lot of my time was spent riding back and forth on the subway.
Why?
Why? Because I had nowhere else to go. I had no one place I could go to and spend time. I didn't have a home to go to. I didn't have friends and family that I could go to.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And for me back then, riding the subway was basically free. I would just jump the rail and get on the subway and just ride the line from one end to the other, back and forth. And that was done to spend time, to pass time. It was, and in the process of passing time and doing that, I was able to see things from other people's point of view. And as I look back on it now, it was what allowed me to be empathetic to other cultures. Because I would see, for example, someone who was maybe Hindu, and I would wonder what their life was about, wonder what their life was like. And I would try to put myself in their shoes. This was done in my mind to not only pass time, but to try to maybe internalize and emulate them in a way for my own identification.
Let me just try to kind of paint with broad strokes, because I get the sense, and I'm guessing that your upbringing was maybe isolated or cloistered. That's a guess. The second question I have is, how about the community? Did you ever was it common for you to leave your neighborhood, or did you and your family tend to stay sort of in the neighborhood and doing sort of the similar routines? So that's my twofold question. Was based off of having a sort of cloistered upbringing, and then also did you tend to stay in the neighborhood? Just sort of briefly.
My upbringing was very cloistered. We were very family oriented, stuck with family. And in my neighborhood, on the immediate street that I lived in, I would go out and we would do things in that aspect. Go out and play. But as I said, I stayed to myself. But my family as a whole, we were very close knit. Like I said, it was a very strict, very religious upbringing. My father had no nonsense rules for the house that, and for his children. I have 6 sisters and 3 brothers, so it was a very large family, and we were given strict orders and rules, guidelines that we had to follow. As far as exploring the surroundings and going outside of our neighborhood, we did, but usually when we went outside of our neighborhood, it was to attend some maybe religious function, or on my mom's side to go to revivals at other churches, or things of that nature. Most of the things we did were centered around religion. It wasn't to just go out and go to the park just to have fun and go out to the park, or to go and just visit the circus just to go to the circus. It was none of those things.
I hear you. Did any of your siblings serve time?
No, none of my siblings have ever been incarcerated that I know of. Now, maybe my older brother, I know he used to sell drugs once he left home, but I don't think he was ever incarcerated for it.
And you've been incarcerated for 22 years?
22 years, yes.
And so that's 19, what is it?
1996.
96, okay. My math is off in the morning. Okay, do you want to address that subject, the subject of your incarceration? Okay.
Absolutely, we can definitely address that. this is where it gets very emotional for me.
Well, let's not do that then, Mpingo. Because the question is how much time do we have? Right now, I'm reading 10 minutes on this phone call.
Right. We do have about 8 to 10 minutes. Uh-huh.
So do you have, because we have 5 more minutes on this call.
Okay.
So, and can you call back after this one?
Yes, I'll call back. I think I can call back in 15 minutes after we hang up.
Oh, okay. Then it's best not
and
to.
Then if you,
yeah.
And then if you would like, we could discuss that. I mean, I have no problem discussing.
Yes.
My incarceration or the reason for it, and I can get into more detail as to why it's an emotional experience for me.
Well, I'm kind of curious on setting up whatchamacallit, sort of time period. So 22 years ago, you're 48, so we're looking at you were around 26 when you were
absolutely
arrested. Okay,
absolutely.
And right now the time period we're talking about is 14, 16. And
absolutely.
So from 16, how long did you live with your sister? Until what age?
I lived with my sister from the time I was 15 until the time I was 17 and in high school.
Okay.
She was just a strong model for me. She was like a mother figure,
mm-hmm.
in the sense that she taught me the way that a mother would teach a daughter.
Mm.
You know, once I explained to her who I felt I was on the inside, she embraced that. And, you know, she told me to never let anyone stop me from being who I am. And she, like I said, she taught me everything from the basics of how to wear makeup to how to, in a sense, seduce a man. So she,
oh wow, okay.
She taught me everything. Yeah, she taught me everything. She embraced, she taught me the ins and outs of being identified as a woman. You know, from a woman's perspective, she taught me the joys of it. She taught me also the burdens of it, the expectations men have, and how at that time men viewed women in so many, especially in like I said, in the African American community, as a support system. And not as an equal in per se, but as someone who's supposed to play the supporting role to their masculine ideology. You know, to be a man means to have all these women, or to have women who are subservient to you. So, you know, she taught me all those things, and she taught me how to deal with those things in a way that it not only enhanced the standing that you would have, but also how to deal with the rejection that he might have if you don't live up to his expectations.
Interesting. That's interesting, because I think about man and woman relationships as being very, very important from the beginning of time.
Right.
And I do believe there is a give take. I don't believe that it's a taking entirely on the man's behalf. I believe that there is a sort of
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
A give and receive that happens, and
you have 60 seconds remaining.
It's sort of like inputs, outputs, and and I really think that relationship, the relationship between man and woman, is integral. In terms of creation of culture, and so
Absolutely.
It's interesting that your sister was teaching this to you, but the interesting thing for me was that she saw
you have 30 seconds remaining.
As you were, and you were receptive to these lessons.
Absolutely. I'll answer that and call you back in 15 minutes.
Okay, Mpingo. Thank you. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hello, Mpingo. Thank you for calling back. Tio MacDonald, East Oakland Times. Mpingo.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think we were speaking on me being 14, my age 14 to 16, and how that was for me. What I did, how did I avoid a lot of the pitfalls and a lot of the draws that so many fall into.
Yes, we did address that, and I think I have a sense of it. It just wasn't in your character. It was completely foreign to you, and
Absolutely.
besides just, maybe catching glimpses on the street, I'd guess. But it seems like, you grew up in innocence and you were cast out. It's
Absolutely.
like, yeah, and you didn't lose your personhood. You didn't lose who you were by being on the streets. You just survived. You survived the way that you were meant to survive, given the circumstances. You survived the way that you knew best. And for a year's time, you have that life experience of, I would imagine, kind of growing up really fast.
Absolutely.
And
ironically, I do not blame my parents, because that's the cultural environment they grew up in. My mom grew up in a sense believing and being taught that as a woman she was to be subservient to her husband. She was to I don't want to just say obey, because there were times when I seen my mom rebel and my dad embraced that rebellion. But in a sense, she was taught to be a supporting role for her husband. And, my sisters growing up, my older sisters, they adopted that same mentality to be a support system to the man and his dreams and his views, his vision, his views, and basically put your own personality, your own dreams, your own visions on the back burner. So culturally, I identified with that, and I don't blame my mom nor my father for imparting that upon me. And it wasn't until I got from under that and began to see other aspects of society that I was able to embrace that, and they basically shaped the mindset that I had.
Yes, and that makes total sense. And that's why this is like similar to another story that the East Oakland Times is publishing. Is actually a children's story. And in it covers the biography of an inmate who grew up in Mississippi, religious home, lots of love, loving family, extreme amount of care that he felt from his parents. His father gets transferred to Los Angeles area, I think Anaheim. His father has a heart attack. He dies. His mother ended up losing her sense, losing basically her ability to cope, and she was institutionalized. He was thrown into the system, and then he gets the system, and so he gets thrown. And this is a young boy who's known nothing but love, and starts to experience these harsh realities. You survived in the streets in sort of a miraculous fashion by doing what you had to do, moved in with your sister were with her for 2 years. Then you ended
Right.
up making it, and at the meantime, you're going to school, which that is sort of
Right.
fascinating to me.
Well,
But yeah,
that was, I'm sorry, that was one of her rules. She said, if you're going to live with me, you're going to get your education. You're going to stay in school. You're going to do those things that's going to help propel you forward. She was big on education, and she had so many aspirations, so many dreams to go off to college and to do all these things, and she wanted that same thing for me, and so she emphasized education to me. She's one of the, like I said, I love to read all my life. That's been my favorite hobby. But she imparted that thirst for knowledge in me on a deeper level. And so that was one of the rules, to stay in school, to get an education, and to, basically not be out running around in the streets.
yes, yes, and bless her heart for taking her in. And I just say that because that also was an act of compassion. How about during when you were 14 on the streets?
Mm-hmm.
Just for clarity's sake, did you attempt to go to school while you were living on the streets as well?
Absolutely, I did. I went to school. A lot of times I skipped class because I was wearing the same clothes, or I didn't have a chance to shower. So what I would do is I would skip classes, but I also made up for those classes during the summer education program. And I started going to the summer education program, the summer school, because the way the system was set up, it was for the underprivileged, and they would feed you free lunches and breakfast. So I would also go for the breakfast and the lunch, and to be able to eat. And that in turn helped me to stay current with my classwork and to get the grades to pass on to the next grade.
Okay, and you were showering, I mean, not showering, but living where you could find places. How about showering? Just curious on
This
that.
call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Well, a lot of times I would go and I would shower at the Howard University. I would go into the dormitories, and I would go and get in one of the showers there, or I would go, and a lot of times they had the public pools, swimming pools, and they would have the shower area, and I would go and jump in one of those showers and shower there, for the most part. And then there were times that I would just pour water on myself from out of a water faucet, from a public water faucet, and basically scrub up real quick and put my clothes back on.
And the weather, especially the winter. I mean, explain
during
surviving
the wintertime.
winter. Yeah.
During the wintertime, that was the hardest for survival. As I said, I'll find myself sleeping in the stacks in the library at Howard University where it was warm. I would go and sneak into the basement of one of the dormitories. There were times when I actually slept on the street and I didn't have anything but a jacket on, and I would curl up in one of the little corners and by one of the little heating vents, or in the corner of one of the storefronts, and try to stay warm. I would go and go to the Salvation Army or go to a shelter, and they would give me a blanket. And a lot of times that blanket they gave me was the only thing that I had to survive. I would keep that blanket with me at all times.
Yes. Okay. So at that time, the Salvation Army was able to assist those without homes and offer some kind of support. Didn't seem like it was
Absolutely.
daily, but that's good.
Absolutely, it was a lifesaver for me. It was. But a lot of times that act of charity was what kept me alive.
Yes. Let's move forward. At 17,
Okay.
you move out of your sister's house.
At 17, at this time, I was working full time with Bonnie at mailboxes, etc. She helped me get my first apartment. She co-signed for my first apartment for me. I was living in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and commuting back and forth to Bethesda, Maryland, where her store was. She helped me get my first apartment. She co-signed for me. She gave me a raise with enough money to pay my rent and be able to eat. At this time, I had already expressed to her she knew all about my family, the rejection, being kicked out. She knew that I was, if without her, I would probably be homeless again.
What was
So
Bonnie's
she
story?
very,
Was she?
I'm sorry?
What was special about her?
I think this may sound crazy, but I think that Bonnie was sent as a purpose to be in my life. She grew up in a loving home. She grew up with loving parents. She grew up with sisters and brothers who were a tight knit community, and she was extremely educated. She had this drive to just progress. That's why she started her own business, and she was just amazing in so many aspects. And I think she was purposely put in my life to help me to elevate to the next level. I mean, I believe that there are people who are placed in our lives at times in our lives who are there for the purpose to help guide us and bring us into our full potential. And she, at that stage in my life, I believe that's where she was placed there for that purpose.
Was she a religious woman, married, children?
Ironically, she was not a religious person. She was, at the time that I met her, she was in her early 30s. She had one son. She was divorced. Her son was, I think at the time, maybe 8, 9 years old. And she was just...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
She was placing her vision in front of her, and she was going after her dream.
Great. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So that work allowed you to, and her help allowed you to get an apartment. And
absolutely.
What happens then?
Well, I got my apartment. What I did do was I ended up leaving school. And I left school because at the time, that's when I started showing my transition. That's when I started, experimenting with wearing feminine clothing, makeup out in public, going out at night and walking around downtown, just to, see the reaction of other people. I started wearing feminine clothing to school, makeup. I was involved in a relationship with a guy who ended up being my best friend, and exploring that. And it was such a negative reaction that it pushed me to leave school. And so what I did was I dropped out of school and I started working full time. I ended up getting my GED instead of getting a high school diploma. And so I focused on that. I focused on working full time. I focused on being able to express who I am to the public.
Yes.
And as I said at that time, there was a lot of blowback from society. There was a lot of blowback from the few people who I had embraced friendships with, and the only other person
you have 60 seconds remaining.
The only other person aside from my sister Audrey who embraced me was Bonnie.
Wow. This is great. I have a thought, and I'm thinking that maybe we should conclude here and start with the second segment on our next podcast. What do you say, Mpingo?
I agree with you.
Okay, perfect. Thank
you.
You
have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for the phone call. And when we get back, we'll enter into these this adolescent next stage, and you start embracing womanhood from the inside and the outside.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll talk with you probably tonight.
Okay. Talk soon.
All right.
Okay. Bye.